Assalamualaikum. Hi guys. In this video, we are going to focus about formal charge. Formal charge is very important for us to know because in some cases, there are two or more possible Lewis structures for one compound. That is why we are going to use formal charge in order for us to determine the best Lewis structure. So, in order for us to know about the formal charge, we are going to learn how to calculate the formal charge. As I mentioned before, formal charge is very important for us to determine the most stable Lewis structure. The definition for formal charge is an apparent charges on certain atom in Lewis structure. So, apa maksud apparent? Apparent ni maksudnya nilai charge yang kita boleh nampak. So in this case, you can calculate that value for formal charge. Tapi syarat yang paling penting, you should know how to draw Lewis structure. Kalau you tak draw Lewis structure yang betul, automatically you will get the wrong formal charge. So we are going to use three factors in order for us to choose the most stable Lewis structure. Ataupun another word, the most plausible Lewis structure. So maksud term plausible ni dia sama dengan the most stable. Okay. And as I mentioned, ada tiga factors that you have to use in order to choose the best Lewis structure. The first factor is the atoms bear the smallest formal charge, which is close to zero. And the next one, the negative formal charge should appear on the most electronegative atom. Kebiasaannya kita ada F, fluorine, oxygen, O, ataupun nitrogen, N. So this is how you want to determine the most electronegative atom yang kebiasaannya digunakan. Next, the third factor adalah the positive formal charge appears on the least electronegative atom. So ini adalah tiga faktor yang kita akan gunakan untuk determine the most plausible Lewis structure. And one more thing that you have to understand, total formal charge on all atoms must equal to zero untuk neutral molecule ataupun must equal to ionic charge untuk polyatomic ion. So kita akan lihatlah apa kita punya compound ataupun ion yang diberikan. Now, I did say that you have to calculate the formal charge. So how do we want to do that? I'm going to introduce to you the formula to calculate the formal charge on an atom in a Lewis structure, di mana kita akan ada total number of valence electron minus total number of non-bonding electrons. So this is about lone pair non-bonding electrons plus 1/2 times total number of bonding electrons. So this is for lone pair. So one lone pair kita ada 2 electrons. And for number of bonding electrons, kebiasaannya bonding pair kita akan lukis dalam bentuk satu baris macam ni. It is equals to 2 electrons as well. So ini adalah the general formula untuk calculate formal charge. And you have to understand the sum of formal charge for the atoms in a molecule or ion must equal to the charge of the molecule or ion. Kalaulah molekul itu adalah neutral, contoh macam CO2, dia adalah neutral. So, semua total charge untuk carbon dan 2 oksigen atom dalam CO2 mesti equals to 0 sebab dia neutral. And another example, kalau contoh saya ada total charge for ion. For example, ion yang saya ada adalah NO2+. So, NO2+ tu total charge untuk total formal charge untuk nitrogen dan 2 oksigen dalam NO2+ mesti equals to positive 1 sebab charge dia adalah positive 1. So that is what I talk about this statement. But I know this formula is very complicated, but at least I hope you can memorize this one. I just want to make it easy for you. I introduce another formula so that you can calculate very fast for the formal charge. So how to calculate another formula? formal charge of an atom equals to valence electrons of that atom minus all items surround it. So, apa maksud items ni? Sekiranya dia dalam bentuk bonding pair macam this one, satu baris macam ni, kita wakilkan dia sebagai satu item. Okay, one item. And then, sekiranya saya ada lone pair, kebiasaannya lone pair dia akan datang 2 dots. Tapi, saya akan kira satu dot sebagai satu item. So, kalau dia ada lone pair, maknanya 2 dots ni 2 item lah. Okay, so kita tak tengok bilangan electrons dalam bonding pair ataupun lone pair. Kita just assume ini sebagai satu item. So, ini adalah cara yang senang untuk awak calculate the formal charge. Let's try example 26. Saya akan gunakan calculation based on the general formula first. So, we are going to calculate each formal charge for each atom dalam ONCl. So, ini adalah kita punya structure for ONCl. So, if I want to calculate based on the formula, for oxygen, saya akan ambil apa yang ada di sekeliling oksigen. If you realize here, oksigen dia ada double bond and dia juga ada 2 lone pair. Okay, that is why oksigen ni octet. Kita tak tunjuklah lone pair dekat sini, tapi saya harap awak masih faham. To achieve the octet configuration, dia mesti ada 8 elektron. So that's why dia ada 2 lone pairs tapi dia tak tunjuk. When we want to calculate the formal charge for oxygen here, kita ada 6 valence electrons minus with 4 non-bonding pair electrons, iaitu lone pair kita ada 4. Okay, 4 dots. Plus 1/2 times 4 bonding pairs electron. Bonding pair kita ada 2 dan setiap satu ada 2 elektron. So that's why ada 4. So when you calculate 6 minus 6 equals to 0. So macam mana kita nak label formal charge? How you want to label the formal charge? You have to label on the structure. So ini adalah kita punya structure. So I'm going to label my formal charge for oxygen dalam kurungan kosong. Like that. And then, let's continue with nitrogen. This is the structure for nitrogen. I bring satu double bond sebelah kiri dan satu bonding pair sebelah kanan. And don't forget, nitrogen dia ada lone pair. Ada satu lone pair. Okay, sebab tu dia cukup 8 electrons. Now, to calculate the formal charge, 5 valence electrons minus with 2 lone pair electrons. Kita ada 2 electrons dalam lone pair plus half times 6 electrons for the bonding pair. 2, 4, 6. So, I got 0 for nitrogen. So, when I want to label, saya akan label on the structure. So, untuk nitrogen, saya akan label dalam kurungan 0 as well. And the last one, I have Cl. So, Cl dekat sini saya ada satu bonding pair sebelah kiri. But don't forget, in order for Cl to achieve the octet stability, sebenarnya dia ada lone pair. Sebanyak 3 lone pairs. Okay, so that is why cukup 8 electrons. Now, chlorine, dia ada 7 valence electron minus 6 lone pair electron. Saya ada 6 dots sekeliling chlorine. Plus half times 2 daripada bonding pair electrons. So 7 minus 7 equals to 0. So how am I going to label? On the atom in the structure, you put in the bracket 0. So when you calculate, there is no marks for this calculation. That is why the final mark adalah di bahagian awak label formal charge on the structure. But walau macam mana pun, to get the correct value so that you can label it on the structure, you still have to calculate. So I hope you can understand this is how we will calculate based on general formula. Let's try one more example. Example 27. I have NF3. So NF3 here is the compound. And then there is no charge for NF3. So it is a neutral compound. So as I mentioned before, we have to calculate the formal charge for NF3 for each atoms in this compound dan pastikan semua total formal charge untuk semua atom dalam NF3 must equals to 0. So how you want to prove that? We are going to calculate one by one. So let's try to do it. But first thing first, I'm going to separate or differentiate 3 different fluorine atoms right now. So I label this one Fa, Fb and Fc, so that you can understand which fluorine I'm talking about. So let's go to the first calculation. For the central atom, we have nitrogen. So nitrogen, we have 5 valence electrons minus with 2 lone pair electrons plus half times 6. Di sini kita ada 3 bonding pairs. So maknanya 6 bonding pair electrons equals to 0. And the next one, for Fa, I have 7 minus 6. Di sini kita ada 6 of lone pair electrons untuk Fa plus 1/2 times 2 bonding pair electrons. So saya ada satu batang dekat fluorine yang bahagian kiri ni. So dia mewakili 2 electrons. That's why I will have 0. And the next one, same goes for Fb and Fc, because the number of lone pair electrons sama sahaja untuk Fa, Fb and Fc. Tapi saya still tunjuklah calculation so that you can understand. Now, you got all the formal charges for all atoms in NF3. So I'm going to total up everything. So the total formal charge should be 0, because 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0. Now, if you realize here, I talked about just now, for neutral molecule, the sum of formal charges of all atoms should be equals to 0. So, maknanya kita dapat 0. So, this is proven. But, you cannot leave it your answer like this one, because as I mentioned before, in order to get 1 mark for formal charge, you have to label the values that you got from the calculation on each atom. So kita akan label for nitrogen and for fluorine atoms 0 on the top of each atom. So inilah cara kita dapat calculation. So inilah cara for you to get the mark for formal charge. So you will have 1 mark for Lewis structure and 1 mark for formal charge. Next, if I want to calculate based on my second formula, this is much more easier. I'm going to show you based on this one, valence electrons minus all items around it. As I mentioned before, this one should be considered as one item. This one should be considered as one item as well. So kita kena lihat satu persatu macam mana kita nak calculate for that part. Let's go to example 28. So I got CO3 2 minus here. So I already drew for you the Lewis structure for CO3 2 minus. So I want to calculate all formal charges for all atoms. But please make sure you label first the different oxygen atom as A, B, C, supaya awak clear yang mana yang saya akan calculate after this. So this is polyatomic ions. So I'm going to make sure I got the total formal charge equals to -2, because the charge for CO3 adalah -2. So let's calculate one by one. I have my central atom, carbon. So carbon we have 4 valence electrons minus with kita ada 4 batang, so maknanya 4 item sekeliling carbon, and then I will have 0. Next, for oxygen, oxygen A, this one, I got 1 item here, and then setiap dot saya kira 1 item, so maknanya ada 7. But the valence electron is 6 for oxygen, so 6 minus 7 equals to -1. Next, we go for OB. So OB, kita ada 6 dots and 1 batang here. So I will get 6 minus 7 equals to -1. And for OC, I have 4 dots plus 2 lines, 2 batang here. So I got 6 minus 6 equals to 0. So when I want to total up everything, the total formal charge should be 0 plus -1 plus -1 plus 0. I will have -2. So this one is proven. Same with the total charge for this polyatomic ion is -2. So untuk anion, the sum of formal charges of all atoms in this Lewis structure should be equals to its negative charge. But please make sure you label the formal charge that you got from this value on the top of each atoms here. So saya akan dapat 1 markah untuk Lewis structure dan saya akan dapat 1 markah untuk FC, the formal charge. Let's try one more example with cation ICl2+. This is the Lewis structure for ICl2+. So I'm going to differentiate 2 chlorine atoms as Cla and Clb. So we are going to calculate the central atom first. So use the same formula because cara calculate dia tak ada markah. Tapi we have to prove whether we got the total formal charge as +1 or not for this example 29. So I'm going to calculate iodine first. We have 7 valence electrons minus with 4 dots plus 2 lines. So kita ada 6. So 7 minus 6 equals to +1. And then Cla, we have 6 dots plus 1 line. Kita ada 7. Valence electrons untuk Cl adalah 7. So 7 minus 7 equals to 0. And the next part I have Clb, 6 dots plus 1 line. So 7 items. I have 7 valence electrons minus with 7 items equals to 0. And when I total up everything, the total formal charge for this species is +1. And this is cation. So that's why the sum of formal charges of all atoms here should be equals to its positive charge, which is +1. And then, don't forget to label the formal charge in the bracket on the top of that each atom. So I will have 0 for Cla, +1 for iodine, and 0 for Clb. And then you will have 1 mark for Lewis structure and 1 mark for formal charge. So I hope all of you clear about how to calculate the formal charge, either using the general formula or the second formula that I introduced to you. That's it for now. I will see you in the next video. Bye!